Thank you, everyone. Thanks for those of you guys joining us in Alt Space today. Thanks for everyone who's watching on YouTube or catching up with us later on as well. Welcome to this week's latest installment of the VR Awards 2021 Winners AMA series. My name is Chris Gumby. I'm from AirXR. I'm the head of memberships and strategic alliances, and we are the organization behind the VR Awards. We're really excited to be joined here today by our VR Healthcare of the Year winner. This is Justin Barad from Osso VR. Justin, do you want to give us a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having us. Such an honor to win this award and be here to answer some questions about the company and what we're doing. My background is I originally started out in video game development and actually somehow ended up becoming an orthopedic surgeon. So I was able to combine my two life passions of video games and healthcare and start Osso VR in 2016, which is a surgical training platform that leverages immersive virtual reality.
Very cool. That's quite a segue from video games into orthopedic surgery.
There's a story there.
Great. Yeah, definitely. We'll get into that hopefully as well. Just a quick one for those guys that are joining us in the room. This is an AMA session, so the point of that is it's an Ask Me Anything. Justin has kindly agreed to come along and be put to sort of any questions you've got, and hopefully that will be very lovely. We have got some questions ourselves, and some that have been submitted by our audience before too. But you should notice there's a raise hand function on here as well. So at any point during today, feel free to pop your hand up and ask away, and we'll pass you the mic, so to speak. But for now, I think we've got a very quick sort of introductory video to Osso and what you guys have been doing, and then we can dive into some questions.
Awesome.
Very cool. I love the music on that. It's been stuck in my head for a couple of days. So tell us the story then. You said there's a bit of a story then. How did Osso come about then? Where did that come? Like you said, you made a segue into surgery and then combined those two loves. So yeah, why don't you take us back to where that began to start with?
Yeah, so I've been passionate about video games my whole life. I've been playing them forever, and I really wanted to create them. So, taught myself to code in middle school. I had the opportunity to work at Activision while I was in high school, and I have a game credit with them, which I'm super proud of. And right around this time, I had a family member who became pretty ill, unfortunately, and they're doing fine now. But at the time, it was a big shock to the system. And I woke up one day and I was like, is there a way I can use software and technology, which I'm so passionate about, not necessarily for entertainment, but to help people? So I ended up changing my major from computer science to biomedical engineering, which I studied at UC Berkeley. Go Bears, big Cal fan. And my goal was to invent healthcare technology. But I had no idea how to get started with invention. So I was kind of asking around for advice, having a bit of a life crisis, honestly. And a mentor of mine told me something that sticks with me to this day. He said, Justin, if you want to invent something, you really need to understand the problem you're trying to solve first. And he thought that one of the best ways to understand medical problems was to be a doctor. So I took his advice maybe a little too literally, and I went to med school at UCLA, and then I did my orthopedic surgery training. And that's really where I started to experience a problem firsthand, which is how we train and assess our healthcare professionals in surgery and procedures. And surgeries, and people would fly in from other countries to get the very best care, and they'd be like, hey Justin, can you go to the computer and Google what to do real quick because we're stuck? And I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And so I kind of started to look into it, and I really saw there were kind of like three core problems that all have been accelerated significantly by the pandemic. One is there's just too much to learn. So if you think about it, accelerating science and technology is expanding the library of procedures we're expected to know how to do on demand. One day I was called and asked to drive down to the zoo within the next hour and operate on a gorilla, which I was totally unprepared for. And it feels like we're dealing with gorilla-like situations on a near daily basis. Problem number two is modern surgery is really complicated. So things like robotics, minimally invasive surgery is about 10 times harder to learn. And then finally, we lack a way to assess proficiency in surgery and procedures. So in my own career, the only time I was really formally assessed for my ability to use my hands and perform a procedure, I was asked to play the board game Operation and remove some of the pieces without buzzing, which I did, and I'm proud of, but that's kind of state of the art at the moment. So seeing all of that firsthand, I was still very involved in gaming, and I got involved in VR with the Oculus DK1. Immediately saw it as an incredible solution. You can use it anytime, anywhere, train on any procedure, train as a team and get trained remotely, and then get objective assessment. And so basically dropped out of full-time medicine to start Osso VR in October 2016. And here we are today.
Amazing. I love that attitude of, yeah, understand the problem. I'll just become a doctor. Yeah, easy as that.
I did.
Very
kind of didn't know what I was signing
cool.
up for. It's been a long road.
Yeah, that's awesome. And just we've actually got so with the award and those sorts of things, it was for some specific projects. And we've actually got, I think, a very quick video again of the some of the actual surgery applications itself that we can give a bit of context to. If we
Sure.
want to dive into that one. Awesome. Very cool. And maybe we should have put a disclaimer up if you're squeamish or anything, but I guess that's what's really cool about
it. Trigger warning. And
yeah,
it's also quite meta to be watching a VR clip from within VR. But go ahead.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, how many fourth walls are we breaking doing that? Yeah, so one thing, and what the award was for, right, was the project around like that really high fidelity models, the really cinematic sort of surgery stuff. So talk to me about that direction then, and how you came about to that project, because some of the models and the detail in that were, I'm sure everyone can agree, pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, I think this is a really interesting sort of insight that we had early on. In the early days, we were really focused on just sort of utilitarian and solving the problem, right? You want untrained surgeon come in, trained surgeon come out. And sort of visual fidelity and visual quality was really not our highest priority. But what we started to understand is that you can have the most effective simulation platform in the world, VR training in the world, right? It could work perfectly. Like all of our research has shown that it worked. But if people don't use it, then it doesn't matter, right? And we realized like changing any industry is challenging, but healthcare especially so. People are very conservative for good reason, because we want to preserve patient safety, and there are a lot of kind of complex stakeholder issues. And what we found is that we were starting to make investments in some visual fidelity. We brought in an actor who had been an Oscar-winning team for his work at Industrial Light and Magic. And the response we got was overwhelming. People were like lining up to experience this new technology and then starting to use it and engage with it long term. And I realized something really interesting, that it's not just enough that a technology works or that a discovery works. It's you have to inspire people to pursue change, to try something new, even when you don't have to give anything up. There are actually examples of this in history. So there's in, if you guys are curious, in like 400 AD, there was a famous doctor named Galen who basically said, I've discovered everything there is to know about medicine, do no more research. And people listened for about 1,000 years. And in the 1400s, there was a doctor named Vesalius, who was in Padua, Italy, and he noticed all of these inaccuracies in Galen's teachings, right? But he didn't go around being like, hey, everyone, you're wrong. Because if he did that, they would have been, branded him a heretic and excommunicated him. So he did something very interesting. The medical school where he worked is one of the very few places that did human dissection. So two people were attracted to that. One was physicians, and the other were artists, actually. And so there was like a lot of very premier expert artists in the area. And so he commissioned them to create a work of medical illustration, a work of art. It's called the Fabrica. And what's interesting is this was such a revolutionary, like, you guys have to look up pictures of this because it just still to this day, you're just like, wow, this is really interesting. I've never seen the human body in this way before. Almost like Body Works, if you've ever been to some of these like dramatic anatomical exhibits. And so everybody rushed to get a copy of this book, not realizing that this was a revolutionary textbook that was overturning 1,000 years of stale knowledge. So what Vesalius did with a book, we're trying to do with virtual reality and cinematic quality, high fidelity visuals. We're inspiring a generation to try doing things in a new way. And it's been working incredibly well. We're seeing on stage here. So this is a really unique insight. And now we've put together an art studio that rivals what you might find at Disney, with Oscar and Emmy winners and people coming from Apple, Industrial Light and Magic, Microsoft, all the top studios coming together to tackle this huge problem and also inspire us to try using this new technology to make the world healthier.
That's awesome. That's so cool, and so cool to have people from those backgrounds coming into that and taking that sort of side of things really seriously as well. Great. Thank you very much for everyone who's coming in and joining us now. Just for those of you who are just joining, a very quick introduction, as you can see from the screens. We're joined here today by Justin Barad of Osso VR. They are the winners of the VR Healthcare of the Year from the VR Awards last year. This is an AMA session, so if you have questions that you would like to ask, please feel free to raise your hand. We did have one a minute ago from Garv, who has now left, and I hope that's not because he thought I was ignoring him. But we will, obviously cover out those questions too, and we've got a few from other audiences elsewhere as well. So thank you very much, everyone, for that. But one thing I'd love to just chat through quickly while we wait to see if other people have got questions to kick off is we've got one more video to show, and then I promise Silver that I will get to you in just a moment. One more video to show very quickly about the comparison of the output of this, right? The results once people have been in this simulation and done that. So I think we can cue it up on the screen, and I'd love for you to just quickly talk us through the results from this, and we can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. As a surgeon myself, it's really important that the technology does work. And so we've done a lot of research in partnership with universities, making sure that this leads to improved skill transfer. So what you're seeing here is a study that was performed at UCLA, where they're training about 20 trainees, 10 trained in Osso VR to a set level of proficiency, and then 10 trained traditionally. And what they're doing here is a shin bone fracture fixation surgery, which is a very common orthopedic procedure. And so you'll see on the right side that the trainees got there pretty quickly, got a nice little handshake. Great job, buddy. If you look on the left side, you'll see there's a little piece of paper there. That's a cheat sheet or a list of steps if you don't remember what to do next. And you'll see that the individual on the left checks that 26 times, whereas the individual trained in VR and assessed checked it 0 times. And so it's a rather stark difference between the two groups. And when they looked at all 20 trainees, they found that the VR trained and assessed individuals performed about 10 points better on a scale called OSATs, about 230% better. And what's really interesting is this study, to me, illustrates the difference between subjective assessment and objective assessment with virtual reality. And sort of my concern, and the reason why we're working so hard here at Osso to grow really quickly and get this to as many people as we can, is that the vast majority of healthcare right now is in that subjective assessment zone. We're making sort of just judgment calls, finger in the wind. We're saying, do I feel ready to do this procedure? Or do I feel like this other person is ready to do this procedure? But how we feel and what reality is can be startlingly different, as you see in this video here. So we have a lot of research with very similar results of order of magnitude. And what we found consistently is the technology works very, very well. Honestly, from my standpoint as a surgeon, more than I thought it would. It is unbelievably effective and it's so exciting. And it's all using video game technology, which is wild when you think about it.
Yeah, that's very cool. Awesome. Okay. Silva, thank you very much for waiting patiently. I'm just gonna pop you on. You should be amplified now. Please, yeah, go ahead and ask your question.
Are you able to hear me now?
Yeah, perfect.
Yep.
Okay, I've noticed when you watch several videos, are those videos supposed to have audio of their own? Because if so, I've never heard any. I hear you guys perfectly, but the videos have always been silent.
Oh, the videos are up on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah, so that latest one wouldn't have done, and the other one just had some music. So hopefully others were able to hear them, but if you weren't, then you didn't miss out on a huge amount. Don't worry.
Okay, I just wondered if it was something I was doing wrong.
The music was great though.
Yeah, some great tunes. Yeah, any questions for Justin at all on the platform? Nope. Cool. No worries. All right. Well, thank you for that. Over. Christy, you got a question? It's me. Just there you go. Go ahead.
Hi, Justin. It's
Hey,
Christy
Christy.
Hansen-Anka. I've interviewed you a couple
Oh,
times.
hi.
I wanted to come say hi.
How are you? Should I come off
Congrats
stage
on
and give
your
you a hug?
Series C. Yeah, maybe after. Congrats on your Series C. What will you be doing in the future?
So where we are now as a
company
company,
for Osso.
it's a great question. So where we are now as a company is we're the world's largest VR surgical training library. We have 160 employees, and we validated many times that the technology has worked. So what do we do now? What we need to do now is we need to get it to people. So this next round of funding is about getting access to healthcare professionals all around the world in every specialty to our technology, which we've proven works. We've created kind of this core foundation. So we are hiring very quickly. We'll be 300 full-time employees by the end of the year to broaden access to Osso VR to as many healthcare professionals as possible, and thus patients. There are about 1.1 million surgeons around the world, 20 to 30 million healthcare professionals that do some kind of procedure, and 310 million major surgeries performed annually. And our vision, our dream of mission accomplished at Osso VR is that every single one of them uses Osso for whatever procedure they need to train and assess themselves to make sure that patients have access to the best techniques and technologies and outcomes.
That's great.
Amazing.
Great. I can't wait to see it.
We're doing it.
We're doing it. Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you, Christy. And yeah, I mean, I guess then that's a good highlight of like where you've come and like say that awesome raise and what you've got for the future of it. And one question we had as well from one of our that was sort of submitted previously by some of our audience was about like where did you come from? Like I know you sort of said about your personal background, but what were some of the early challenges that you came across in building this out?
I mean, how long do you have? You know, the challenges were many, and Christy was there for a lot of it. It's, you know, the startup, the nature of a startup and starting a new category is, you know, failure is the name of the game. You know, fail fast, fail often, kind of thing. So, you know, daily micro failures of discovering kind of what works, what doesn't, trying to find the right business model, trying to figure out, you know, there's a lot you can do with this technology. I think is probably one of the biggest challenges is VR is almost too powerful and too capable. So you can run into trouble because you may try and do too much and spread yourself too thin. And so we made a conscious decision very early on to really focus our efforts in terms of what specialties, what customers we're trying to talk to, what features we had in the technology so that we could scale quickly. And sometimes we said no to quite a bit. People that wanted to work with us, people that wanted to do really interesting things, but we're like, we need to create something that's truly scalable and focus on building that core foundation, which we have now. And so that is something I'm really proud of. Another thing early on that was kind of like a happy accident, I'd say, is that my co-founder, Matt Newport, who had just left Electronic Arts, was really, for whatever reason, dead set on starting a full remote VR company. And like at the time, I was like, my understanding is that you just couldn't do that, that would never work. But I had no other partners. He was my one partner. And so, he came with that and I came with wanting to lead with mission. And so I'm like, okay, let's do it. So from day one in October 2016, Osso VR has been a fully remote VR enabled company.
Wow.
And in those days, when we told people that we were fully remote, and we kept it kind of on the DL because we didn't want to scare anyone. But when people found out, they told us we were out of our mind. This would never scale. And at some point we need to open up an office. And here we are today. Like, we could not have been more fortunate. And it's interesting, like, we're all doing remote work right now and we're pretty used to it. But when people come and join Osso, they just tell us it feels different. And it's because everyone has signed up for work like this and we've always been doing it. So we just do it a bit better than everybody else. So that's been a really unique kind of, I would say, insight along the journey. But it goes on and on. I could talk all day about just, all of the things decisions we made that turned out to be right, and just things that were completely unplanned that, I'd say that the journey of a startup, there's a lot that we put into it as a team, and there's a lot that fans has to do with it as well. Like, who could have predicted that a global pandemic would have taken place, which was horrible. And this has been a difficult few years for us all. But in terms of the utility of remote learning modalities and VR, it really accelerated the interest and the adoption of technologies like this.
Yeah, no, it's cool. Yeah, so 4 years after you started, you really came into your own while everyone was scrambling around to try and figure out how to do this. So no, that's incredible. Do you guys use the technology for your work? Like, how do you guys collaborate? Does it come into that, or is it not quite there yet?
We do. This is a major focus for us right now. Traditionally we've jumped between a lot of different platforms. We have a custom rec room space that we're utilizing pretty frequently. It does have some size limitations that got to be challenging as we started like nearing 100 people. So we actually have someone that is, almost full-time working on leveraging what we call, there's two channels, VR for work and VR for fun. And so we now have a custom Horizon space that we're starting to leverage in a more systematized way internally to make sure that we are kind of eating our own dog food when it comes to leveraging VR internally.
Cool. Yeah, no, super important. That's great. So just a reminder, everyone, hands up if you have any questions. We can get through everybody's for sure. Another question I guess we had that kind of feeds into, your background, and you mentioned you've got a team yourself from gaming, you're co-founder from EA. How was the reception from the healthcare industry to gamers and, I guess, gaming technology to a certain extent of coming in to solve some of these challenges?
I think it's been really interesting. I would say in the early days, we were hesitant to even use the word game because we really wanted this to be seen as a serious training tool. And, people come up to me and be like, oh, like, I want to play with this, or show me your toy that you have there. And like, well, this is meant to train surgeons and improve outcomes. And so we really got away from that kind of like gaming focus. But now that the technology is so widely utilized and much more accepted as normal, we are kind of starting to talk about that again for a couple of reasons. One is we do come from the world of gaming. A lot of us also, a lot of us come from AAA film and also the world of medical illustration and health technologies. Very diverse team, but we want to be proud of our heritage when it comes to that gaming background. And something that I think is really important, and I'd love everyone to take this away from here. Like, this has been a very difficult few years for everyone, but especially for those of us in healthcare. And healthcare, it kind of sucks right now. And it really isn't fun when someone comes in with a new technology and they're often saying like, hey, like, everything you're doing sucks, but use my widget and I'll fix everything, right? Like, that feels like they're kicking you while you're down. And so we try to bring to healthcare at Osso is a sense of positivity, excitement, fun, optimism. We want to recognize how amazing the people and the techniques and technologies we have today are and how lucky we are. It's borderline miraculous. I could tell you guys some surgeries that I do that, I feel like are borderline magic. But we also want to say better is possible. And so we just want to, like, surgery is very serious work. Taking care of patients is serious, but it's also a lot of fun. That's why people do this. That's why they go through 14 years of education to do this, because it's fun to help people. And so why can't a company be associated with gaming, be associated with fun, and inspire people to have a good time in healthcare, and make it kind of a happier place, right? It's a little too morose right now. So we really want to kind of like elevate the enthusiasm and the optimism. And so that is why we're talking more about our gaming roots and our gaming backgrounds, and focusing on things like visual fidelity and cinematic quality fidelity, while keeping that clinical foundation strong, right? Evidence-based, it works, and having that sort of foundation of authenticity.
That's awesome. And has it changed? How many sort of like locations and countries is your platform used in now?
It's hard to keep track of. Well over 30 countries. We're training, depending on the month, anywhere between 3,000 to 4,000 healthcare professionals a month.
Wow, that is amazing. I mean, some sort of emoji round of applause for that as well. That's really impressive. And did that? I don't know. Does the reception? I mean, we found a lot with our other members in healthcare and other people we speak to, that issues like funding an experience like this, or approvals, or regulation can vary from location to location, from different types of health trusts, from different types of healthcare themselves. Have you found that as a challenge, or has it been pretty receptive wherever you've gone?
It's interesting. Education or training technologies are typically not regulated by regulatory bodies in most countries thus far. When you start veering into space where you are making treatment recommendations, or you're involving patient-specific data, that starts to fall under regulatory purview. And we're sort of dabbling in that a little bit, but thus far we've kind of avoided any sort of regulatory oversight.
Cool. All right, makes sense. Great. Christy, you have another question?
Yes, just one more question. So Justin, can you talk about from the beginning in 2016, what kind of pushback you were getting back then on this, when you're going to companies or you're going to hospital systems and trying to implement this or trying to sell the idea of it, versus today? Has there been any difference? Are people more experienced with VR when you're talking to them, or is it still kind of a new technology for them?
I would say the vast majority of the people at this point are familiar with VR, and most people have tried it. Occasionally you see people that haven't, but it's definitely more rare now. Back then, there was a lot of pushback from a variety of perspectives. Probably, one of the biggest is, early VR was like unbelievably clunky. Like, it's kind of nuts when you think about it, like what we're all using now. This is amazing. But I had like a poster-sized desktop with a graphics card in it, and then you needed sensor cameras, or you needed those Vive base stations. It was a lot. So people saw that and they're like, oh boy, that already seems pretty intimidating. It was so novel that I think that compensated for it somewhat. But the visual fidelity, the screen door effect, all sorts of things that kind of hampered the early experience. But I think really what it comes down to is expectation. This is a very, very interesting area, because I have not met a single person who has not wondered what surgical simulation should look like. It's just a natural human thought that we all have, whether you're in healthcare or not. It's fascinating. And so everyone that I spoke to, whether in healthcare or out of healthcare, had this image in their mind of this like giant sort of space station that 100% simulates the surgery. And it's like, only that can work. And if it's not that, it's not worth pursuing. And so what we've been trying to sort of educate the world on, and now is sort of becoming much more standardized, is where does this technology plug in to our sort of learning journey? It's not magic. It's not going to solve 100% of our problems. But when you actually do the math, it takes us like 80 to 90% of the way there. We're not replacing like practicing on cadavers or operating on real people. Even cadavers are not a substitute for that. But what we're doing is making that much more safer and giving us an easy, scalable assessment platform that you can use with you anytime, anywhere. There's all sorts of data and all sorts of modeling I can kind of provide that show people that. And most surgeons you talk to, the second you say it's like, hey, we're not trying to replace operating on patients or operating on cadavers. We're just trying to make that much more effective because it's like almost useless right now when you look at the data. Like if we go to a cadaver lab, we're going to forget 90% of what we learned within a week. That's not really a good use of time, money, and someone who donated their body for us to get educated, which is kind of wild when you think about it. So once you kind of put that into people's heads and you change sort of how they're looking at the technology, most people almost immediately be like, oh, I didn't even think about that. This makes a lot more sense. The last thing I'll say that people are caught up on is haptic feedback. That is, I talk about this probably every single day, and I'm happy to because it is so fascinating how our brains interpret the sensation of touch. And so how important is haptic feedback for kind of like the early learning curve for procedural proficiency? Well, it really depends on the form factor. So when most people say, hey, like this really needs haptic feedback, well, we do have haptic feedback. These controllers have sophisticated cutaneous haptics that we can customize. So when you're drilling through bone, just as an example, whether you're drilling through young bone or elderly, fragile bone, whether it's diaphyseal bone and there's like a hollow portion, or it's metaphyseal where it's more consistent, we can simulate that and it feels unbelievably amazing. But most people are like, well, it needs to be kinesthetic force feedback or grounded kinesthetic haptic feedback. The idea that if I push against the floor here, well, I guess I'd actually hit the floor. If I push against like a virtual wall, like with these controls, my hand will go through it, but with kinesthetic force feedback, it would stop my hand. What's interesting is this technology has existed for decades, and there's a lot of research about it. And when you look at the research, it shows that when you train with that haptic feedback or no haptic feedback at all, there's no difference in skill transfer. It doesn't seem to help. Secondly, it feels really weird to people. So there's an uncanny valley issue. And so I won't go through all of the studies here, but and then finally you lose accessibility component, which trumps everything else, right? Like if you have a simulator that is 100% realistic and has all sorts of crazy haptic feedback, but only 5 people get to use it once a year, that doesn't really do a whole lot for healthcare. But if you have a simulation platform that can simulate any procedure on a $300 headset that you can use every day and bring with you, and in remote areas of the world, they can access it, that is transformational, right? We need to think about that impact. Finally, I'll just point out a couple of like real life examples I find very interesting when it comes to haptic feedback, kind of pushback, no pun intended. The first is the iPhone, right? Like everybody said that, you'd never, like there are articles in TechCrunch you can see from 2007 is really interesting. It's like the iPhone will fail. Who could ever send an email without a physical keyboard? And so we all know how that went, but that was actually a really big debate back then. And then the other is the Da Vinci robot, which is really fascinating. The #1 requested feature of the early Da Vinci was haptic feedback. How could I possibly exchange a heart valve or remove a prostate without the sense of touch? But every single prototype, and they went through hundreds, surgeons hated it. It didn't feel right. They didn't get it quite right. No one could agree what it should feel like. Finally, they just threw their hands up and they gave them a robot with no haptics at all. And everybody loved it. And what's even weirder is they said the haptics felt great, even though there were none. Because our brains are very complicated when it comes to the sense of touch. And we have something called tactile memory that can actually do something called digital synesthesia or create a sense of touch even when there is none. And what research seems to show is that cutaneous haptics, for whatever reason, avoids a lot of these issues. It's lower cost and portable and seems to work much better. And it's an active area of research, both in robotics and simulation. So I would say those are kind of the two things that were common to get pushback on in the early stage, much less so today, but still conversations that we're having. That is a great question, Christy.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Christy. Yeah, awesome question. Yeah, and anyone else that has questions, we've got about 20 minutes or so left. So please, raise your hand and ask those from there. Building just on one of, I guess, the start of that question about the early days of that, not necessarily a pushback. Like you said, a lot of people are familiar with VR now, or they've at least heard of it and the concept of it. One question, do you have any experiences particularly stand out that are, positive experiences of when you first shown somebody this technology, whether it's through your own experiences or other parts of technology itself?
I mean, thousands. You know, I think one of the things is, most people assume that, this is a technology for sort of the next generation, right? Like you have an incoming generation that's currently in training or in medical school that is so-called digitally literate, that not only is really excited and facile with the technology, but they expect it. And when I show this to sort of people who are in training today, like, oh, this is awesome. I love this. And I'm like, yeah. And, it's only been around for a couple of years. And they're like, really? Because it's, when people see this, they just assume that this is how it's always been, because why wouldn't you have something like that? But what's interesting, and this is another thing that we get pushback on sometimes, Christy, is that it's like, oh, this is a young person's technology. This isn't for everybody. And that's actually simply not true. And that's been really interesting for me, because one is actually our most frequent user is not a medical student, it's not a resident, it's what I call the early career surgeon. This is someone who has just finished their formal training, they finished their 5 to 7 years of residency fellowship, and now they're starting their own practice. And starting a practice is like opening a restaurant. You have to first decide, what am I going to put on the menu, which is sort of a challenge in itself, and then you have to learn how to do those dishes. And it's counterintuitively a disproportionate educational burden, because most of these procedures you probably actually didn't do in your training. Kind of just a new challenge we have now. But we've also been able to demo the technology to much more experienced surgeons and healthcare professionals who are later in their career. And I'll never forget, there was this one surgeon who's like, pretty near retirement, and he went through and just crushed this tibial nail. Like he just dominated this procedure. Everyone was like, whoa. And he came out of it and he turned to me and he's like, I guess you can teach an old dog new tricks. The thing is like, it's not so much about being good with technology. It's about being good with surgery, right? He knew how to do that procedure. So he just put the headset on, then he just did the surgery. It's not about figuring out VR, right? And it's actually something called construct validity. That means that we did a good job of recreating the real life experience, because he just kind of did what he always does. He did it with a headset on. So that was one of my favorite experiences, though, because it just put a huge smile on my face. And it really is so rare to have a technology. It feels like it really is for everyone. It's unambiguously positive.
Great. Amazing. Perfect. I guess from a slightly selfish point of view, and just to go through this, can you tell us a little bit about how the awards nomination came about? What sort of went into that for you? What has it meant since the award itself?
I have followed the VR awards since the very beginning. And it's been a huge inspiration for me. There's not a lot in this space where you can get this kind of recognition. So I've always followed it and really admired the companies that have won. And so we were very interested to throw our hat in the ring. And to be nominated was a huge honor. I don't think any of us expected to win, which is like, oh, exciting. And I don't know, it's to take something from nothing to, this incredible team, this culture, like, Osso VR, like in the early days, if I didn't do something, it wasn't going to happen. But now I just work here, and this place is awesome. Like everybody's amazing. And so this has been like a just pretty incredible few weeks for us. And to win an award like this, honestly, makes me a little emotional, because I feel like everybody's along for the ride. I feel that like this sense of belief and support that I've just never felt before, when, everyone at the company took a leap of faith on this mission and something they believed in. And it really feels like this year, like you're starting to just see people be like, hey, like this is important and this is amazing, and we're all about it. And I just feel it from everywhere. And it's honestly, I can't describe it any other way, like both exciting and making me a little emotional in a very positive way.
That's awesome. Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's that's got me a bit as well. So what's your big tip then? If now somebody watching this either in the audience or on YouTube or whatever is thinking about starting out in this space, or whether it's medical technology, whether it's the immersive industries, and maybe they're where you were in 2016, what's the key takeaway for you?
It depends on what you want to do. I think my mentor's advice, has paid off in spades. Like if you are going to be an innovator, be an entrepreneur, just, I mean, the one thing is like just deeply understand the problem. And I think, you know, what I now know, having gone through this, it's not about just understanding the problem. It's about being passionate about the problem. Because I was faced with a decision one day. You know, I was doing a really awesome program at Stanford that I was so excited about, but I couldn't keep doing both. I had to choose between pursuing Osso or pursuing my career of full-time academic surgery, which I had been preparing 14 years to do. It was a very long road, and it was scary. And at the time, I believed I would never be able to operate again. I thought it was just one or the other, and that was that. So I had met with someone once. I was interviewing at the Hospital for Sick Kids, this incredible hospital in Toronto. And the director there told me something very interesting. He said, I can tell you're different, Justin, so I'm just going to give you some advice. He said, don't worry about what you're supposed to do to be successful. Just do what you're passionate about, and success will come from that. And so when I was in that moment, when I was facing this existential career crisis, which is so stressful, I thought about what I was truly passionate about. And most startups fail. 99.9% also was not going to make it. So I thought, like, what if it didn't make it? I still wouldn't have cared, because to me, there's nothing more important to me than solving this problem. It felt existential to my family, my friends, myself, and a profession that I care so, so deeply about. So even if it didn't work, if I spent a year, 2 years, 3 years, even if I could never operate again, I feel like it would have been worth it, because I tried to solve something that I felt was so important. I wake up every day, no matter how many obstacles are thrown in our way, excited about being able to solve this problem even a little bit, because it's so huge and so important to me. And what's been crazy is other people started to feel that way too. And every day, more and more people would be like, "Hey, like I think this is really important too. I want to help you with this." And you know, where in those early days I felt like I was a crazy person on an island, and now I'm a crazy person not on an island. You know, you start to feel this groundswell, and that's why I was kind of relating earlier with this award, where I just feel this huge amount of support that just means the world to us.
Amazing. Yeah, you've not on your own on the island anymore. You've got a whole colony of believers with you. That's great. And yeah, we're right up there. So thank you very much for people who joined us. I think we've had a few people in now. We did have a question, hands raised a minute ago from somebody. Let me just see. Uncle Ben, yeah, you've got a question? Nope. Okay, we'll come back to you if you think of that. Aiden, is it? Have you got a question for Justin?
Oh,
Is it just me that can't hear, or?
no, I'm not. Yeah.
Nope. Okay. Well, guys, if you have a question, let us know. We can put you on the microphone, and you can go ahead, and we'll broadcast you to everybody else to ask that question. Great. Well, I guess one thing then, we've got 10 minutes left, guys. So if you do have questions and you want to come back, then do let us know. I'm getting feverish waves from Uncle Ben over here. You very cute. Oh, let me try. Should we try this again? Go ahead. You should have the megaphone.
Trying to help each other a little bit.
All right. Yeah, sorry, Ben. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. We'll keep you on there. If you're able to pipe up in a sec, then we'll dive straight into your question. But just one question that I wanted to ask as well, very quickly, while we wait for those tech issues there. We're seeing obviously great success with this technology for helping those people that are going through these really complex surgeries and explaining, like you said, what are difficult, complicated procedures to them, and a lot of times they know what that is, but it's about that sort of muscle memory. With something like this, with such high fidelity and able to really accurately explain something quite complex, are you seeing applications for this in patient education as well? Maybe not.
There's definitely a lot of opportunity for VR in healthcare in general, especially training and education. I think are one of the most amazing use cases for VR, and the other one being sort of like productivity and connectivity, like what we're doing here. It's interesting because that is a very different need, and there are a lot of different approaches there, whereas our focus is much more on technical training and assessment. So, it's like teaching someone to play the piano or the guitar, making sure that they can do that. And so I think from a patient-facing standpoint, I think, things that would be interesting to us would be like, sometimes we do ask patients to do rather technical things. Sometimes they need to inject themselves with rather sophisticated contraptions, or sometimes they need to operate at-home dialysis machines, which can be quite complex, even for a physician. So there are some situations where patients could face a high educational burden. Another thing people have asked us is like, well, can you use these simulations to sort of show patients like what they'll be experiencing? And that's been interesting. It's been kind of a mixed bag. Like one patient I ran through one of the simulations we showed here, and wow, I feel like I understand. I had this surgery a few months ago. I feel like I understand so much better. And a couple of weeks later, I had another patient who had the surgery, and they were like, I wish I didn't know that. So it's a level of detail that, not everybody may want necessarily, but, I do think that there is an opportunity here, not just for education, but for engagement. I don't know exactly what it'll look like, but I do a lot of telemedicine work these days. And, it's hard to communicate with someone on just a 2D flat screen with video, and doing something like this is much more natural, feels much more like you're at the doctor's office. So while it's helpful to actually, if there's some sort of visual element of that part of the exam that you need to see, but from an engagement standpoint, this is so much more enjoyable for everybody. So that could be interesting down the road. But I think that would take some time, because even getting patients to get like a Zoom conference to work can be somewhat challenging and slow things down. So I can't imagine getting a headset on them. But certainly there's a lot of greenfield when it comes to VR in healthcare. You're already seeing a lot of very exciting applications. There's a company called Applied VR that's doing some really interesting sort of therapeutic type work, kind of like pain related, anxiety related. There's a company XR Health that's doing some sort of rehab type work that's pretty interesting, post-op care in a variety of areas. So we're seeing VR really kind of explode within healthcare in a lot of interesting areas. But I think the one area where you can just really show this like disproportionate outcome so far seems to be the training and assessment, which has been really exciting for us.
Yeah, that's really cool, and probably a good point about some of the patient stuff. Just knock me out and do it. Don't tell me what's happening. I'll wake up and figure out afterwards. Okay, cool. Like I say, guys, we've got a few more people left in the audience, and we've got about sort of 5 minutes or so left. So any last questions, get those in now. One thing just to quickly touch on then, while we wait to see there, training in VR, and like you said, that's where it's really exploded, and that's probably where the main applications we're seeing, and probably not just in healthcare as well. But are there any major misconceptions you see about training using the technology, or any sort of, I guess we had it with pushbacks and things earlier, but anything else that you come across with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about most of them there before. I'd probably say the one thing, and this feels like less of a question now, but another area I get asked about frequently is the difference between augmented reality and virtual reality. And I think for sort of unsophisticated people within healthcare, a lot of people can think that, well, augmented reality will be the evolution of VR, like it's all heading in that direction. So let's just jump there now. Whereas I really see it as much more of an apples and oranges. It is like really complex, right? Especially now that we have much more pass-through type technology, and like, what Michael Abrash calls augmented virtual reality. It gets confusing even when you're in VR. But I really view these things as quite separate, because VR to me is unambiguously better for training, because you can fully simulate the environment you're in. It is much more affordable. It has relatively higher processing power when it comes to sort of, rendering and visual representation. The hand tracking is much more sophisticated and reliable. And so are all sorts of reasons why for training, VR makes much more sense. Now, if you are interacting with the real world, like you're in the operating room or you're like in a clinic with patients, then augmented reality becomes interesting, but it's just a very separate use case. So it's, I see them as more synergistic, but not like an evolution, like, hey, we should start training in AR as opposed to VR, because that's where it's all going, which I don't necessarily believe to be the case.
Okay, cool. Nice one. Yeah, we're all waiting to see. It'll be interesting to see where that goes next. So, cool. Last sort of 5 minutes then. Why don't you sort of run us out and tell us about what's next for you guys now? Obviously, a really exciting news with the raise, an award-winning company. We hope to see you at Tears Awards as well, hopefully. But what's next for you guys? What are you working on? Anything you'd like to shout about before we close out today?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is, once again, we are broadening access to our platform to as many healthcare providers as possible. And to do that, we're hiring a lot. So if you are interested in working in this field at all, please check out our website, www.ossovr.com. Follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, and check out the latest job postings. Check out what we're up to. We really want to make sure we're getting the best and brightest from all around the world, from all industries, to join together, continue to build this incredible pizza-loving culture, and solve one of the greatest challenges in healthcare, leveraging virtual reality and video game technology.
Amazing. Yeah, well, I'm sure you'll be hopefully flooded with people coming in because it sounds like a great and awesome place to work. So thank you very much, everybody in the room. I'm not seeing any more other hands up, and I've gone through my list of questions that we've got from our other socials and things as well. So yeah, we will leave that there, but I'm sure Justin will happily be around to chat to any other sort of questions or those that send through, or please do have a look at their jobs and other products. Quick plug as well, then we'll be carrying on next week with another one of these AMAs in the series for VR Awards winners. So please check that out. Same time again next week. And we hope to see you there. But Justin, thank you so much. Congrats again on the win. Congrats again on the raise. And we can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. It's a total honor.